evacuation point outside of the building. So do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from councillors Brereton, Dew, Goulson, Jordan, Mockpool, Slade and Tevlin.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 1, which is the minutes. Do we all agree these minutes are a correct record of the meeting held on the 17th of June 2024? Thank you. Moving on to item 2, members' interests. Are there any members that wish to declare an interest in any of the items on the agenda tonight? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. 3C Farset, obviously they're local farmers, so I know them, but I have no other connection, so I shall take part in the debate.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thanks, Chair. With respect to 3F Huntingdon, I'm one of the local ward members, but I've had no involvement in the application and plan to participate as normal.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark.
Yes, ward member at Ramsey, and also I have to declare a wellbeing interest with the applicant's representative. We'll have to leave the room.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest in item 3F as I'm a member of Huntingdon Town Council, but I took no part in their discussion or vote on this application.
Thank you very much. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. 3D as a ward member.
Thank you very much. And Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. I'd like to declare a non-registrable interest in 3F Huntingdon. I'm a member of Huntingdon Town Council, but I took no part in the decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item 3 on our agenda. And item 3A is an application for Somersham, which will be presented to us by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. So the site in front of you tonight is Legacy Park on Chatteris Road, Somersham, and the proposal is for the use of land, change of use of land for Gypsy and Traveller residential use, creating 7 pitches, comprising of the site of 1 mobile home, 1 touring caravan, a day room, associated parking, and a new children's play area. So the application site is located in the countryside to the northeast of Somersham, about 2.9 kilometres travelling distance from the centre of the village. The site is primarily in flood zone 3A with small sections of flood zone 2 and is therefore considered to be at high risk of flooding from river sources. The flood risk also relates to the northwestern corner site, which is shown as being at risk of surface water flooding, and also the western portion of the site at high risk of groundwater flooding. So you can see the site outlined in red on the screen in front of you, and you can see the rest of the site outlined in blue. That's an aerial image of the site. So you can see we're dealing with the western element of the site. So just a bit of background to this. So the site's come forward in 3 elements. The eastern element of the site benefits from permanent planning permission for 4 pitches. The central element of the site now benefits from a 5-year temporary planning permission for a further 4 pitches, which was allowed at appeal on the 30th of May this year. And this application relates to the western element of the site. As I stated, this is seeking for a further 7 pitches, including 2 transit pitches, which is basically temporary transit accommodation for Gypsy and Travellers. So a bit more just on the recent appeal. So it's allowed for on the basis that a sequential test needs to be carried out due to the high risk of flooding. HDC are in the process of updating its Gypsy and Traveller assessment needs survey, and we're also in the process of preparing a new local plan, so therefore also in the process of allocating sites for development. just run. So that's just a photo looking towards the site. You can see quite open. This is outlined in the report. There's various things we assess against. One of the things to try and avoid is kind of like high amounts of like boundary treatment, usually like large fences, etc. So you can see quite an open part of the site. And what we're looking at is that kind of towards, beyond those bushes just there is the western part of the site. This is a site plan, but one of the conditions is asking for an updated site plan to make sure it reflects what's going to be on the site, but just an idea of how it could be accommodated. So you can see the 7 pitches there and also the play area. So taking into account the personal circumstances and the recent appeal decision, officers are therefore recommending approval for a temporary 5-year basis, which is consistent with the recent appeal decision. So you can just see on the screen there, approval subject to the following conditions. And again, these are in line with the recent appeal decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers on this particular application. Our first speaker is Councillor Richard Sutton from Somersham Parish Council. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. And when you're ready, just press the middle button on here.
Right, thank you. Yeah, Somersham Parish Council objects to this planning application on several grounds. First of all, it is in the open countryside. Also, it's overdevelopment on the site. And as was pointed out at a previous hearing on another matter, Somersham has, in 8 years, has gone from no traveller site to 6 traveller sites. So, you know, it is growing in that direction. We also feel that the inspector's report from 2018 is still valid on the grounds of the flooding as mentioned by Environment Agency and the Internal Draining Board, and also the Cambridge Highways Authority about the access onto the site. Conditions were imposed then for the highways by the Highways Authority, and they still have not been met, as is in the Planning Officer's report, that the highways are still recommending that it ought to be made to highway standards. We also feel that, that there is insufficient infrastructure for the proposal, and also the development will increase disturbance and have a negative effect on biodiversity, including protected species. And there are bats nesting in the old trees on the site. As for transit, we find that we have already got a registered site for caravans and motorhomes already in the village, and therefore we do not feel that another site is necessary. Finally, I'd just like to say, as per experience with previous applications on this site, the council are very concerned that if approval is given, that any agreements will not be adhered to on conditions, as the owner of the site has not kept to any of the conditions that have been imposed previously. So we ask you to reject this.
Thank you very much for addressing us. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for joining us. Our next speaker on this particular application is the agent, who is Michael Hargreaves. Welcome and thank you for joining us. And when you're ready, press the middle button, which has the no above it. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening on behalf of the applicant Fred Adams and his family who are here with me tonight. The recent appeal hearing granted planning permission for 4 traveller pitches, as Lewis said, for a temporary 5-year period on adjoining land. The current application is for 7 pitches on land at the rear, together with a children's play area. 5 of the pitches are for specific families. 2 will be transit pitches. I think the gentleman from the Parish Council is slightly confused about the difference between a touring caravan site and a transit site, which is specifically for gypsy people who are travelling through the area, maybe homeless. Transit, there's a chronic shortage of transit accommodation for gypsy people, and providing it will help avoid unauthorised encampments. It's a really good thing. The council does not have the required 5-year supply of sites for gypsy people. All the families are in need of accommodation with no suitable alternatives available to them. And we will see soon, very, very likely, from when the new traveller needs assessment is published, that there's an increase in need. There's been a legal change in the definition of who is a gypsy for planning purposes, and that alone will have a significant increase, lead to a significant increase in need. This is the type of location that works well for both travellers and the rest of the community, a little way away from a village with good services. The site is very well screened by mature trees all the way around it, and the inspector specifically said that it did no harm to the surrounding landscape. While the parish council has objected, there is a letter of support from a neighbour and no objections from local residents. Mr. Tomlinson would be able to confirm that the site isn't overcrowded. For a traveller site, it's actually quite spacious, you know, and Mr. Tomlinson would be able to confirm that it provides good quality accommodation. Mr. Adams and his family live on the site and ensure it is well managed. Basically, and the people living on the site are relative, some friends in need of accommodation. It's a very well managed, high quality site. We welcome the officer recommendation of a temporary 5-year permission, which builds on the appeal inspector's conclusions. Given the inspector's findings, there would need to be strong reasons not to approve the current application for a temporary 5-year period. If anything, the case for allowing the application is stronger than for the appeal site, because there are children involved and their interests carry a lot of weight. Thank you. I can answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. We did hear from the previous, from the Parish Council, and also I've, having been to the site a few times myself, what is the reason that the access and egress has not been done in accordance with county councillors previously? And what sort of, can you advise us as to what makes the Parish Council give them some confidence that it's actually going to be done in accordance with the county council regulations for highways for the access and egress?
Conditions to the application can require that. The applicant will be happy to install it to the level required if necessary. I mean, it's a bit of a technical point. It is not a difficult access.
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree it's not a difficult access, but it hasn't been done to date. So what makes us believe it's going to be done in the future?
Ultimately, it's up to. I have a lot of confidence in this applicant. He will do what is necessary, and ultimately the council can enforce. But the point is, this is a well-managed site. It meets a real need. It provides good quality accommodation in an ideal location for gypsy people.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from councillors for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you. We will now move on to questions of clarification for our planning officers. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lewis, for the report and presentation. 7.34 mentions the personal circumstances and gypsy status settlement. How much weight should be attached to that? I know you mentioned it in your remarks. How valid is that statement to our deliberations this evening?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I think when we're comparing this site to the appeal site, like the agent mentioned, if anything, this has more weight given to it because of the children. So just be mindful of that. Why, yes, they're both for pitches. They've both been assessed on their own merit. So when we're looking at Gypsy and Traveller, we take each personal basic consent in a theory and assess it. So if somebody doesn't meet the definition, then obviously they don't comply with that. So I think just be mindful that, yeah, when we talk about the appeal decision, it obviously is a material consideration. This stands up on its own 2 feet. It's gone for its own assessment, but significant weight to the personal circumstances. Obviously, we can only provide so much information within the report because of its personal circumstances, health reasons, etc. But officers are reviewed and happy and content with it.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Sequential test, there's none been done. Is one necessary, or how do we regard that if there isn't a sequential test been done?
So normally we'd require that sequential test prior to determination. That's obviously a big factor. I think we have to be mindful of the recent appeal decision here and kind of the basis that the inspector came to their conclusion. This is a very different situation from, say, a personal dwelling. We're not talking about residential dwellings here. We're talking about Gypsy and Traveller accommodation. So there's a different type of sequential test required. And a big factor for that is, one, our needs assessment, which isn't up to date. It's currently in the process of being updated. The other is local plan review and the allocation of sites. So in theory, we've got 2 missing pieces for that sequential test that would feed in to show what sites are available and obviously at lower risk of flooding. Without that information, the inspector concluded that they could do a temporary plan permission for 5 years while the council sorts out the new local plan and the needs assessment, which would then also give the opportunity for the applicant to carry out a sequential test with having all the information available. So it's an interesting situation we find ourselves in, but I think we have to be mindful that obviously I can answer your question, but read the report in detail because I can't take part of it kind of out of context. There's a detailed assessment there of the flood risk and how the inspectors come to that conclusion. But you're right, normally we'd require it, but we're being consistent here with the recent appeal decision.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I was going to touch on a point of clarity around flood risk, but Councillor Butler's helpfully got there first. Could I just ask as well, I'm confident we're clear, but perhaps it bears a reminder just to confirm the relevance of concerns around enforcement of previous planning conditions to our decision on a planning matter here tonight, and whether that is or isn't a matter we should be taking account of.
So I think, yes, we have to be mindful that some conditions may not be complied with in the past. Again, kind of sound like a broken record. The inspector concluded that applying that condition again, as per the advice of the local highway authority, was acceptable. Obviously, if that is not complied with, it's an enforcement issue. So I think as this site has gone, I guess, been developed further, obviously with the eastern part where the original condition was imposed. And then again with the recent appeal decision, and then this one, the condition is on both consents. So it'll be a matter for enforcement if that's not carried out. But yeah, it's not a reason to turn down the application. I think we have to be clear. If a development can be made acceptable through conditions, then planning permission should be granted. The inspectors obviously considered this. It was discussed at the hearing, and it was deemed acceptable to be conditioned again. So it's an enforcement issue if the condition isn't complied with.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful to be clear about.
Thank you very much. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of items. How much weight should we give? Because we've heard about children, so therefore it gives slightly greater weight. But how much weight should we give when it's also refers to in 7.41 about the fact that the roadway from there to where they need to go to school, etc., has no pathway, which is obviously a concern. That's one aspect. And the second one is you talked about the conditions that you could put in there. Are you allowed to put in a condition that says prior to any further development, therefore the road access would be put up to the acceptable standard? Now, obviously I'm aware it could still happen, but I mean, at least then from an enforcement perspective, it could be looked at slightly earlier if it was prior to further increase in sites.
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the connection to Somersham, obviously there's been 2 other applications where it's been deemed acceptable in terms of location. Neither application or has been refused on that basis, so just be mindful of that. Yes, obviously there is a concern about the separation, but it's not been raised as an issue on the very recent appeal decision. We're talking about May. That was obviously discussed at the hearing, and the inspectors found that to be acceptable. In terms of the wording of the condition, it could be, so because this is basically retrospective application, we have to think of the triggers. We also have to be mindful that we follow the inspector's advice really on that recent appeal decision, so the conditions should align. I'll have a think about it, but we obviously just need to make sure it's reasonable, the trigger that we put on. So most likely the conditions are going to pretty much follow the recent appeal decision, because it'd be inconsistent for us to then start changing the wording of conditions.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, just as a matter of a technicality then, and picking up on Lewis's point, what we would request through you, Chair, is perhaps the final wording of that condition to be delegated to officers.
Thank you. Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of points have already been picked up by my colleagues. So just as far as I understand it, the flood risk is sort of covered in quite a lot of detail, and then essentially the 5-year planning permission seems to be the response to that, if I understand that correctly. There's also a point in 7.91 regarding the lack of an ecological assessment. So at the bottom of that paragraph, it mentions that it could be secured by condition, but I can't see that amongst the recommended conditions. Is that again something that is kind of picked up by the temporary permission? And I've got one other question, if I do them both at the same time, if that's okay. So in 7.89, it refers to infrastructure requirements for the site. And it says, apart from gas and foul drainage, and main services are available, and the site is appropriately serviced by infrastructure. So I just wanted to understand a bit more about what the position is in terms of foul drainage and why that hasn't caused a trigger. Thank you.
I'll just pick up the biodiversity point first. So in terms of that, that's picked up in the site development condition. So that covers a range of factors, everything from waste, biodiversity, lighting, fencing, etc. Just have to bear with me for foul drainage. I'm just going to have to remind myself. I haven't got that information to hand, but obviously, again, it goes back to this point of the recent appeal decision. It was deemed acceptable. There are obviously, it's an existing site. Like I said, it has that permanent plan permission on the eastern part. The central part's just been allowed on appeal, and then we're dealing with this western part. So it has been deemed acceptable in terms of the infrastructure of foul drainage. I just don't have that information right to hand. But I think on that basis, with the recent approval, we can be satisfied is acceptable.
Are there any other questions of clarification before we move on to the discussion? There are no other questions, so we will move on to the discussion on this particular application. Councillor Wakeford, thank you very much for starting us off.
Thank you. We've had an unusually lengthy questions session, but I think it's been really helpful in enabling us as a committee to get to grips with a number of the very particular facts here, because clearly there are some features which would, on their face, give rise to concern around an application, not least on points around flood risk and others that we've referenced. But I think in the round, in these circumstances here, particularly in view of the recent appeals decision on the literally adjacent part of the same site, I struggle to see how we could defensively reach any conclusion other than that which is recommended by officers. So I am content, Chair, to propose up front that we adopt the recommendation of approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford, and I'll accept that proposal. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll second Councillor Wakeford's proposal. We had a very lengthy question-answer session here with Lewis, who answered our questions thoroughly. And I think, given, as Councillor Wakeford said, the previous appeal decision, I can't see a reason to decline this application, so I'm happy to second the approval. Thank you.
Councillor Niche.
I actually concur to a number of degrees, but I do have, like I think, a number of concerns, which I think with the conditions that we're looking at, plus what we've heard from what we can and can't do from an appeal perspective, I think as long as we really keep an eye on certain those specifics, then actually you're right. Looking through it, there are a number of areas where we couldn't go against it if we felt that way, purely because we haven't done housing needs survey and other areas which fall us into that. So apart from the concerns, I do concur with my colleagues here that there aren't any material planning reasons as to why, from a balance perspective, that we couldn't go through with this.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford, do you have something that you wish to add?
Thank you. Just further to that, it may have been implicit when I spoke before, but just to be explicit, I'd suggest making sure that the proposal is subject to the delegation around specific language, as Clara suggested earlier. But just thought I'd make that clear.
Thank you very much, because I would have come back to you. Councillor Sanderson.
With that slight change, is Councillor Sanderson happy with that?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. It's mainly ticks all the boxes. There's nobody really against it. The only thing is the County Council highways and this access. Obviously, the agents here and the applicant, they're listening to what we're saying. I know you can't probably condition that access is done first, but I think they'll get the feeling that we are concerned about that access. Thank you. And hopefully get that in as soon as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors that wish to contribute to this discussion? Therefore, we will move on and we will take Councillor Wakeford's proposal of approval with delegating the wording to conditions to our Chief Planning Officers. And we've been seconded by Councillor Sanderson for approval. All those who are minded to approve, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Therefore, that has been approved. we will move on to item 3B on the agenda, which is an item in Abbottsley, which will be presented to us by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. So the site that this application relates to is Abbottsley Golf Course, Abbottsley Golf Club in Abbottsley, and the proposal is for the proposed change of use from golf clubhouse and hotel to form 14 dwellings, demolition of later extensions to the heritage assets, greenkeeper store, shop and office, and the erection of 5 dwellings, 19 dwellings in total, and associated works. So you can see the site in red in front of you, and you can see the blue outline, which also covers the golf course. So the application site consists of a cluster of buildings that were formerly agricultural, but have more recently been used as facilities in association with the golf club, including the hotel, which is now closed. This just shows the constraints. It's a bit hard to get it clear because it's quite like a big access leading up to the site, but if you just followed the cursor along the road, you can kind of see a blue line which indicates the public right of way, which goes past the site but slightly through that existing greenkeeper store, and then aligns again with the track. So it kind of diverts from the track slightly to the north, goes into the site and back onto the track. And also you can see that the building to the right hand side, that is in Ainsbury Hardwick House, which is a Grade 2 listed building, falls outside of the application site, but is under the applicant's ownership. A number of the buildings, therefore, also Kirch's listed, which is mindful going forward. The later additions to the farmstead are not considered to have any heritage or architectural merit. So the application site is therefore in the open countryside. Like I said, the public right-of-way goes through the site and then follows the track. Members should be aware that a previous application for 22 dwellings was refused on grounds of principle, access, drainage, and Section 106. So I'll just run you through photos. So you've got the access from Potton Road. You've got the site access itself. You've got the greenkeeper store, which is to be demolished. Again, the greenkeeper store. Again, the greenkeeper store in the back of that photo. You've got the Smithy building, which is Kirch's listed, that's to be converted. You've got the golf clubhouse, which is to be converted. And again, and again, and again, and one more time. You've then also got the hotel building, which is to be converted. So again, another photo, and another photo, and another photo. And then that is a photo of the central element of the site. So as you can see, the buildings are redundant, clearly in good state, ready to be converted. And you can see, yeah, quite well landscaped, hard landscaping that you'd expect with kind of associated parking, etc. So this is a existing site plan. The greenkeeper store is this large building here, which is currently built on top of the public right-of-way and adjacent to that track. You've got the Smithy building here. You've got golf clubhouse buildings here, which Kirch is listed. So is the Smithy, sorry. And then you've got the old hotel building here. And then that's the central element of the site we just saw the last photo, and the access comes around here. So that is the proposed site plan in front of you. So you can see the plan application, obviously, as I've said, seeks to convert two of the existing buildings. And then to the south of the part of the site where the greenkeeper store is to demolish that building and replace it with 5 new dwellings. I'll just run through the plans quickly. So you got units 1 to 7, which is the hotel conversion. As you can see, no major external changes apart from the introduction of doors to make sure you've got access to serving the units. Units 8 and 9, which is at the top of the golf clubhouse conversion. Again, no major external changes to these buildings. Just again, creation of accesses, etc. Unit 11, Unit 12, Unit 13, Unit 14. So Unit 15 is one of the first new builds to the south of the site, which is replacing the greenkeeper store. You've got Unit 16, Unit 17, Unit 18 and 19. So just to summarise, so the application is in front of you tonight because Abbottsley Parish Council object to new builds in the countryside, poor access, residential amenity impact on Stockman's Cottage, no affordable housing. In terms of the main assessment against this application is LP 33, which allows for the conversion of rural buildings and also the replacement of rural buildings. It does allow for an increase in floor space, but noted in this case, there's actually a decrease in floor space because the greenkeeper store is a substantial building. In terms of the access, we obviously hear the concerns, but highways have confirmed the proposed residential use will have less movements than the previous hotel and golf club use. So that's the key kind of assessment there. The public right-of-way team have also confirmed no objection, subject to condition. Obviously, an application to divert the public right-of-way will need to be submitted separately with Cambridgeshire County Council. In terms of residential impact on Stockman's Cottage, the dwellings nearest to it have been designed in a way to limit any potential impact. And in terms of affordable housing, there is vacant building credits on the site, and it actually is a decrease in floor space, so would not be liable for affordable housing provision. And the previous reasons for refusal have been addressed. So the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions in front of you. I'll just note that there's been an update report in relation to this one, and that was for the public right-of-way comments that were received, stating no objection. And you'll see the addition of a condition at the end, referring to the public right-of-way being sorted at the earlier stage. Great, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is an objector who is John Gearing. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and when you're ready you can press the middle button which has no above it.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Chair and Committee. I'm here as a beneficial occupier of one of the lodges which is sharing the access road to this scheme. In my opinion, this scheme is flawed. It's flawed because little consideration has been given to the persons that will be using what is effectively nearly a half-mile concrete road. It is listed as being said in the officer's notes that it's 3 metres wide. In actual fact, for the majority of the length of it, it's only 2.7 metres wide. Much has been said of the Highways report. Well, of course, the Highways report will make reference to the junction of this concrete lane where it abuts Drawes Lane, which is the public highway. They really won't be too concerned about the actual use of the concrete road which services this development. And what we need to look at is the fact that this is 19 residential family units. Family units means that children will be occupying the houses, and they're likely to be teenage children. They will be wanting to get to school. What are they likely to do? Walk down this nearly half-mile country road, not lit, and in bad condition, no footpath, and they'll be mixing with traffic. Clearly, any golden rule for planning is to try and segregate cars from pedestrians. I have printed Rule 163 from the Highway Code. I'm happy to pass copies of this around to any of the committee members that might want to see that. But that recommends that there should be at least 1.5 metres when overtaking cyclists and at least 2 metres space when cars are passing pedestrians. There is absolutely no way down this half-mile track from this development to the main highway that can be achieved. This is a disaster waiting to happen, not been fully considered, and there is an alternative way to deal with it, in my opinion, so it can be overcome, and I'm not against the scheme of developing redundant golf buildings, but you cannot really allow 19 family units to have children walking down an unlit road for nearly half a mile in a scheme of this kind without some alternative measure being made for pavements and alternative footpaths. That's where my objection lies. Thank you very much, committee.
Thank you very much for addressing the committee. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Our next speaker for this particular application is the agent, Daniel Jones. Welcome and thank you for joining us. And when you're ready, you can press the middle button that says no.
Yep.
And you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Right. Thank you, Chair and Committee. I'm Daniel Jones. I've worked for over 30 years in development of rural sites and diversification. This is a very good set of buildings. It's been summarised very well. Certainly worthy of retention by any local plan tests. This is a good chance to find a once and for all solution for these heritage buildings and to make a big improvement to preserve and enhance what is there at the moment. As per LP 33, and as Lewis Tomlinson said, you can have a modest increase. There is no increase, there's a decrease overall. That lean-to building you saw on the front of the golf clubhouse, for example, is coming off, which is a modern addition, which automatically makes a big improvement. It's actually, in all the hundreds of schemes I've dealt with, it's one of the more sustainable in terms of where it sits in relation to a nearby significant settlement with all facilities and everything, because obviously a lot of rural schemes are much further out than this. It's inherently sustainable to use all those buildings, all the embodied carbon that's already there and the infrastructure. Traffic will be less than what has been in the past and less than any other use that this site could be put to. So residential is the most appropriate use. And it's a long time since only being able to rely on the private car has been a reason that can be used to turn down applications like this. The whole ethos of what we've done, or since I've been involved, is to look at a holistic plan for the site and to have a range of sizes and types of buildings. So you've got from a one-bed flat, they're not all family units, to family houses, and you've also got from single-storey, a number of single-storey, to two-storey houses. So you've got the ability there to have a community of people from young starter, single people, couples, whatever, to older people wanting to live maybe in single story and everything in between. The idea is that it will become a sort of safety community. People will look after each other. It will be a beautiful place to live, and we're trying to produce better homes and aesthetic places these days. There's no technical objections. The conservation officer is 100% happy and always has been. The footpath will move. And thank you for all the collaboration and help and guidance we've had from Lewis Tomlinson and from Matthew Paul, your urban design team. And I think we have ended up with a better scheme than where we started. So thank you.
Thank you very much for addressing us. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to the points made by the previous speaker, what do you say about the safety of the access to the site regarding children and the rather long lane to get to and from? Is there any provision being made by that within the development?
There is a public footpath. There are numerous passing places, as highways have confirmed. So, I mean, you can see one after you've gone past the previous one. There's no blind areas. There's obviously a lot less traffic than we had before. I think, in reality, it's unlikely that children are going to be walking down there and then alongside of Drawes Lane to go to school. And, you know, it is going to be reliant on the private car, but a lot of rural, especially residential developments are now. If the officers feel that there's something we should do in terms of the factors that were raised, then we will certainly look at them and address them. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I nearly withdrew it, but it's on a similar vein. Do you have any plans to upgrade that access road that's down there? I know it's a long road because I did travel down it, but I just wondered whether there was any plans to upgrade it at all. I know it's not Highways having to ask for it, but...
Yes, I think we will need to. We've actually been on this scheme quite a long time, and once we finally get the planning consent, we'll, we've got to sell the houses, haven't we? So, and some of them are big houses, so they're going to expect a road of quality.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
We will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Are you going to preempt it? One of the concerns I had is once I found the place, which was maybe my technical skills of navigation, and actually following the road down there thinking, I think I'm in the wrong location, actually getting down there, and unfortunately I went on a motorbike, so it's slightly simpler. But my concern is talking about the access there. So two questions is, have we spoken to Ops about refuse collection? Now, I know it's not necessarily, I try to flick through as to whether I could find it in here. And secondly, did you get a response from the Fire and Rescue Service about access and egress for fire appliances and access and egress of firefighting, specifically in a couple of the corners, which I haven't measured, just look like quite a long distance away from where, if an appliance could get down there, where they might be sited. It might be nothing to do with planning, but I just wondered whether you'd had a response from that perspective, because I think it's building control.
So a few questions there. So just before I come to that, I just want to clarify one of the questions that you asked of the speaker. So in terms of upgrades to the road, nothing is proposed as part of this application. I think when we're looking at something like that, which would be a Section 106 mitigation, obviously the first kind of port of call would be the local highway authority to request that. They haven't. And I think when we're looking at this particular application and the proposed use, because it is a change of use, we've got to compare it against that existing use. So the main reason that highways have found it to be acceptable is the reduction in number of movements that could happen on the existing consented use. So just be mindful, obviously here, the parish council and the local residents' concerns around access, obviously that's been a big part of the application. But as officers, we have to take advice from the technical consultee, which is the highway authority in this case. In terms of waste, we haven't got comments in regards to that. I think what I would propose in this case is to impose a condition for the waste collection strategy. So then members are satisfied that we have answers and we have a scheme in place, because it may require a private collection company. Sorry, I've gone blank. What was fire hydrants. Again, if members feel it necessary, we could condition that. I think obviously these are existing buildings, so conversions in this case, so there will be systems in place as such. But I think if members feel it necessary, we can impose that condition on. So again, members then can be satisfied that there will be a scheme in place for it. I think that was everything.
Councillor Niche.
Yeah, if I may come back, it's not just the hydrants, it's the access for the fire appliances, which require minimum width and weight, of course, of their vehicles are similar to ops, which again I think is building control. But also it's potentially building control, I know, is to access for fighting a fire at one of the extreme points there. Potentially might require sprinklers, but again, I think it's building control, but I'm just raising it as an awareness.
So I think considering that it's an existing site, obviously there's buildings on this, would have already been considered, but it is a building regulations matter, so you can't stray too far into that outside planning. Obviously the fire hydrants, conditions, have that sorted. Obviously that will have wording in there that kind of allows them to put forward the existing strategy as well, so we can consider that and consult the necessary people. But it is a building regulations matter. So yeah, I think if members wish, we can obviously add that condition on for fire hydrants.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the Highways report very, clearly puts forward that there'll be fewer car journeys than have been previously. So that's fairly straightforward. But I think the objector, the local resident, and also the parish council talks about the width and the condition of the access road. I'm just looking. I mean, if you have teenagers potentially walking to school, it's just over an hour's walk to the nearest secondary school. I don't imagine there'd be a lot of people making that journey by foot, but it is possible. And just sort of, without wishing to preempt the debate, just if there's any advice on, how we might consider that issue when we come to debate, that would be really welcome.
So we have to be mindful of the principal development here. So the main policy to look at is policy LP 33. And that is for the conversion of rural buildings or the replacement of rural buildings. Within that policy, it does not talk about sustainability. So we don't consider how sustainable a location is, but considering the buildings itself, the visual impacts. And this is basically around the reuse of buildings. It follows the NPPF, which talks about conversions. It goes beyond the NPPF and then talks about replacements. But there isn't any scope within that policy to bring in sustainability. So I think when we're looking at this, just be mindful that we're looking at an existing brownfield site, the reuse of that and the redevelopment of that site. So yeah, while obviously hear the concerns, it's not something that we can give significant weight to in the planning assessment. Obviously that alongside the fact that we have local highway authority comments supporting the application with a reduction in trips, but we're also noting that that access is a public right of way. So we've also got the public right-of-way team at Cambridgeshire County Council have also raised no objection. So people do walk down there anyway. It clearly is then a public right-of-way. People are meant to walk down there. In terms of the upgrades to that, and I think this is where the local highway authority and the public rights-of-way team would have sought mitigation if they deemed it necessary. Anything to that requires an application to Cambridgeshire County Council because it's a right-of-way. So such as the diversion of it, the public rights of way, because currently there's a building on top of it. Again, goes through an application, that's a consultation as well. So I think just members need to be mindful of the existing use of the site, the comments we've got from consultees, the fact that they haven't sought any mitigation, that we have to make sure then is it reasonable to ask for it when we haven't got consultees requesting it. But I hear the concerns, I do, but obviously as officers, that's the assessment that we've got in front of us.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. I just want to ask a question at paragraph 1.6 about the previous proposal, which was declined in 2021. I know this is for 19 dwellings. The previous one was for 22. But a lot of the points made previously about access to services, they're obviously still relevant. Is the only difference the reduction in the number of dwellings? And I noticed in the previous application it mentioned insufficiently detailed plans and supporting evidence to demonstrate that safe physical access to and from the public highway can be achieved. I mean, it sounds like they've actually done that now. So is that where we're now recommending approval? Is that effectively one of the reasons?
So through you, Chair. So yeah, so the main difference between this application and the last application, so the last application in theory contained new build dwellings that weren't covered under LP 33. So they were going beyond that replacement of the Greenkeeper store and proposing additional new build dwellings. Therefore, there wasn't a policy backing for it because it's in the open countryside. Obviously, the first thing planners do is we've got to make sure that new dwellings are either in well related to a built up area or within a built up area, unless we have a policy like LP 33 where we've got conversion or replacement. So it was going beyond that demolition of the Greenkeeper store and then proposing dwellings beyond that. So that's the main difference, is that we're in a different type of assessment in this application. We're focused on LP 33. In terms of the other reasons for refusal, so under this application, so if I just go through them, so access, so they've provided additional highway information, which has been consulted on, then highways have removed their objection. Again, same with flooding, they provided drainage information as such strategy, so then the lead local flood authority have removed their objection. And in terms of the Section 106, because of the reduction in number of dwellings, the change in the site layout, clearly identified open space areas, again, that's been overcome. So this scheme is different, it's reduction, but the key difference is that policy backing. On the previous application, it didn't have it. It was new builds in the countryside. This is under LP 33. So that's the big difference. Hence why I think when you look at reason one, you can see sustainability, and that's when we'd bring in sustainability, when we don't have LP 33 there to assess it against. And that's the whole point of the development plan, is to make sure we get the development in the right areas.
Thank you very much. We will move on to our debate. Who would like to start the discussion? Thank you very much, Councillor Nish.
Thank you, Chair. I think overall, the only issues I have, because I think it is a good use of this, it's brownfield site, it's reutilising it, it's going to provide accommodation, houses, etc., etc. My only one drawback is that access and egress, because let's face it, highways are interested in how do you get to that road, because I'm guessing it's going to be an unadopted road. They're not interested in the particular unadopted road that's going all the way down to the houses. So my only concern is, one is that roadway for both refuse collection, which I think we need to check, because obviously they can do it in different ways, because I know the sites just at the top, I think from what I could see, they wheel their bins to the end of the road, but that's not far. This is impossible to do that. So there's obviously got to be an alternative way of getting rid of their refuse. And also, as we said, looking at fire provision, but I know that's not to do with us, but that would be my concern on this one, is that it actually is confirmed, which building control will do, which is not in our aspect from a planning. So overall, I think it's a good use of the site. There are concerns. If it had been new, I'd have said no, no, no. But the fact is, we're reusing a site, and LP 33 comes in on that. So I'm happy to propose acceptance, as long as we ensure those conditions that we can condition are looked at. The 106 from a water provision, which I'm surprised technically is probably already there, because there was a hotel there, but there's no telling, because it must have been missed completely then as well. So yes, I'm happy to propose that we accept it, subject to those conditions that we've talked about through the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've known this site for many years. I knew it when it was a golf course, and the buildings at that time were quite good. I think it is important, although the hotel section was put in at a later date, it's important that these buildings are developed before, I won't say fall down, because they're not in that condition, but I just think it will make a nice little development. Once again, as always, it's a balancing act between the harm and the benefit. The harm I see is the sustainability, but I think the benefits of bringing 19 new dwellings, or creating 19 new dwellings, outweighs the sustainability side, and I think it'll be quite a nice little development, actually, so I'll second that proposal.
Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I think we agree with everything that's been said, and Councillor Butler just beat me to second it anyway. But I think just whilst we obviously condition the path or or the issue with regarding to the access. Obviously, we've got the agent here, and just sort of urge him to sort of take on board the concerns we've got, whilst they're tidying up the road there and implementing a new one. Maybe they could sort of consider their new residents and hopefully sort of take notice and put something more in than what there is now.
Thank you. Councillor Wakefield.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I concur with colleagues. This conforms with LP 33. I just note it's disappointing that we aren't in a position to be able to expect and require affordable housing provision here, but the NPPF is clear, as is helpfully set out in the paper in the context of a reduction in floor space. We can't condition that, but that might be a question observers would have looking at this, which I'm conscious we haven't discussed in any detail. But given the circumstances of the application, I'm very happy to support the proposal that's been made already, which I think Councillor Niche clarified was subject to the two conditions around the waste collection strategy and ensuring connections for fire hydrants, if I've understood that correctly, as the conditions in the proposal on the table.
Okay, so we have a proposal from Councillor Niche, and which has been seconded by Councillor Butler, and on the condition that we delegate powers to our Chief Planning Officer to do the wording for refuge collections and to address fire hydrants as well and vehicles. So with that in mind, all those who are in approval, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Therefore, that has been approved. We will move on to item 3C on our agenda, which is a planning application in Farset, and this will be presented to us by our planning officer, Lucy Bateman.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. This application is referred to Development Management Committee because the Officer recommendation of approval is contrary to the parish councils. This application seeks to vary two conditions on the original consent. That's the approved plans condition and the feedstock limit condition. And just to summarise the changes, but I'll talk through them in more detail, it's to amend the design and layout of the site and to increase the feedstock by 15% in a 12-month period. So here we have an outline of the site. It's roughly 2.63 acres and it's situated to the west of Ponders Bridge, and that falls within Fenland District Council's administrative boundary. The wider sites of those buildings just outside of the outline, these are owned by Colmark Growers and currently used for the storage and packing associated with the processing of onions. So here we have an aerial image. Just for a bit of background, permission was first granted on this site for an anaerobic digestion plant with associated infrastructure in November 2018. This permission is no longer extant. I've set it out in the report, but just a brief overview of what the anaerobic digestion process is. It's where bacteria biodegrades organic material, in this case, onion waste and crops such as straw, potato and maize, in the absence of oxygen, and this creates biomethane and heat. And in this case, that would be used on site to heat existing buildings in that onion processing. And also exported to National Grid via a pipeline. And then the process also creates digestate, which would be used as biofertilizer on the applicant's farmland. So the latest permission for the anaerobic digestion plant was granted in September 2023, which this application looks to amend, and this is the approved site layout for that application. And then next slide, we've got the proposed site layout under this application. So the application looks to vary the approved plans to show the amendments to the size and/or siting of plant on the site and additional ancillary equipment. It also seeks to increase the total amount of feedstock. So condition 13 on that original permission, the feedstock limit was 43,200 tonnes per annum. And under this application, we're seeking a 15% increase in a 12-month period. It's understood that the amount of biomethane generated would have remained the same as previously approved. However, the system requires greater flexibility by putting more feedstock in than previously accounted for. The application has been supported by updated technical documents, including noise and odour assessments and details of additional vehicle movements associated with those amendments. As with the previous scheme, the activities proposed require an environmental permit from the Environment Agency, which is separate to the planning process. Our environmental health colleagues have raised no objection, but noting that this is covered by the Environment Agency's permitting regime, which would control environmental emissions from the process, such as air pollution, noise and odour. And then in terms of additional vehicle movements associated with the 15% increase in feedstock, we're looking at 1.7 additional lorry movements and 4.8 tractor movements in the operating week of the site above the approved scheme, so the original permission. The highways officer considers that this can't be seen as a significant increase and then has raised no objection on this basis. So here are the proposed elevational views. The report sets out the assessment on the impact to the countryside. This is a rural setting, but it's not considered that the increase to the size and height and/or siting of the plant or various equipment would result in detrimental harm to the setting of the site in the context of those existing buildings and having regard to the approved scheme. It's also worth noting that proposal retains the landscaping bund and buffer to the north of the site, and then a 5-metre landscape strip to the western boundary. Just got some photographs to run through of the site. So this is looking southwest, so this would be where the anaerobic digestion plant and various equipment would be located. And this is looking back towards the existing buildings. And then we've got some various viewpoints from surrounding the site. So this is from Herne Road. So in the distance, you can see the existing buildings on the site and the crates. So roughly where those crates are, where the proposal would be. And then this is slightly further down Herne Road, near the junction with Oil Mills Road. And then the view from Ramsey Road. And this is the existing access of the site, which would be used for the proposal. So the officer recommendation is for approval, and that is subject to all those conditions imposed on the original application, apart from those that are proposed to be varied. So that's condition 2 for the approved plans. Essentially, the plans submitted with this application would be replaced by those existing ones, and then the feedstock limit, that would be increased to account for that 15% proposed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. We have 2 speakers for this particular application. Our first speaker is Councillor David Gillam from Farset Parish Council. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and if you press the middle button that says no.
All right, thank you very much. Firstly, we know it has existing approval, but the application states it's not visible from the road. Now you can see from your photographs that it clearly is visible from the road. The Environmental Agency recommend they're not within 250 metres of dwellings or other public buildings. It is half of that development is within 250 metres of dwellings in Ponders Bridge. The visual impact, they say there's not much of a change of visual impact from the elevations. Well, the buildings are going from 11 metres on the existing approval to 20 metres high. And you can see from the plans there that there's a vast increase in the physical size of the development. Traffic volume, you're saying that it's going to go up from 43,200 approved tonnes to almost 50,000 tonnes per year. Now, I'm not sure if that is a 20 or 12-month operational period, or if it's only operational short term. Is it only operational for 6 months of the year, or what? I don't know. And the traffic, you know, there's a lot of traffic on these fen roads. They are not built for massive lorries. The traffic is bad enough as it is. Increasing it is going to make things worse. Access is bad. There's very poor lighting. It's narrow fen roads, etc. Noise and odour, well, you're going to have to control that somewhere. But that's a difficult one, because that only comes with enforcement. You can't say it's not going to happen, because it will happen. And when it has happened, it's too late. Both Farset, Whittlesea and Fenland oppose this on traffic conditions, volume of traffic, suitability of roads, etc. Other than that, I can't say much more. It's obvious all the residents have complained about it, parish councils have complained about it, we've all objected to it. So that is the best I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for addressing us. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for coming this evening. Our next speaker for this particular application is the agent, David Mead. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And when you're ready, you've got 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and you can press the middle button.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. I'll just effectively deal with the issues that have been raised by the Parish Council to try and speed things up. Just on the first comment about saying it's not visible from the road, that's actually only about visible from the road in the context of site visits for the officer to visit. So if they need to get access to the site, you say it's not visible from the road, it'd be a much better way to understand the impact that a development would have. It's a part of the form itself. Some of the buildings have got higher, and there's more plant now. But when you look at the site layout plan, the plant, it's more like shipping containers and various bits and pieces like that. When you look at that sort of context, the digester itself has got higher, but the majority of it is the gas bubble on top of it, rather than concrete. The traffic movement issue, so that is over the full 12 months. It's not packed into a 6 month part. The digester has to be fed effectively daily. There's room on site, as you'll see from the site layout plan, in the clamps, which allows storage to make sure that there's always something to go in there, but the actual traffic movements are spread out throughout the year in a 5.5 days week. So it's Monday to Friday and Saturday mornings. And that's the only time that any traffic is allowed to enter or leave the site with regard to feeding the digester or anything associated with it. Yes, there will be a small increase in traffic, as the case officer has made reference to. And again, that's per week we were talking about with regard to 1.7 lorries and 4.8 tractors, not per day. And the reason why we've had to increase the overall amount of feedstock, or at least the allowance to have more, is simply because the calorific value of the feedstock changes depending on how much moisture is in it, and we do need to have the flexibility to make sure that that it covers that. So, and of course, more water means it's heavier, and the restriction on the feedstock is based on weight rather than calorific amount. So it's simply to deal with that. The actual amount of energy that's produced by the plant will stay exactly the same as approved at the moment. With regard to noise and odour, full noise report's been submitted, a full odour report has been submitted. Both, there's no objections from Huntingdonshire's Environmental Health, and I should also be noted there's no objection from Fenlands from them as a local planning authority either, although I do accept there's an objection from Facet Parish Council and Whittlesea Town Council. I'm quite happy to answer any questions. Hopefully I've dealt with the comments made by the Parish Council, but if there's anything else, then let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much for addressing us. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Hi, David. Thanks for coming to see us. I just note at paragraph 7.11 and 7.12, conditions 3 and 4 are still outstanding. Will they be forthcoming? Will the details be forthcoming in the near future? So that's the landscaping and planting details, and condition 3 is the external finishes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the application in front of you at the moment is just to vary the condition regarding the approved plans and the feedstock levels. It's not discharging any conditions at all. As soon as this is approved, then effectively details for 3 and 4 and all of the other conditions that are required would be submitted. Yes.
Councillor Butler.
Seems to be a little bit of concern about odour. Can you explain, I mean, what we can see is a digestate lagoon and a clamp. I mean, are they both covered to stop any odour there may be?
So the digester itself is fully enclosed and doesn't have any emissions coming from it at all. The whole point of it is that it creates, there's no oxygen in there, and there's nothing comes out of it apart from the digestate itself, which is controlled, so it doesn't leak any smell or air. The clamps have to be covered, and part of the submission, the original submission, because this is the variation of the existing approval, included details of how those clamps are covered and secured. And as pointed out, it also requires Environment Agency licenses that deal with those specific issues, but they're outside of this remit effectively. But yes, so that's all been dealt with as part of the existing permission.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
I'm on. Yes, good evening. Can I assume that most of the extra traffic will be tractors and trailers rather than heavy 40-tonners to alleviate the problem of the Facet with extra heavy vehicles on the road?
Councillor Clark, could I just ask you to either move your microphone or move closer
Sorry.
to it just so that we can hear it?
I'll go again.
Thank you.
Can I assume that the extra traffic will involve more tractors and trailers rather than heavy 40-ton lorries to offset the Facet councillors' problem?
The extra movements, the vast majority of the extra movements are tractors and trailers, and not HGVs. I think it's 3 to 1, something like that.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for addressing us this evening. We will then move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I remember the application coming through well, and back then it actually came through Ramsey Town Council as well. As you've seen, most of the photographs were taken from within Ramsey Parish. This didn't come to us this time. Is there a reason for that? Or is it, because we obviously we share half the village with Whittlesea. I know the application sits the Whittlesea side of the river, but it still has an impact on our residents.
Thank you. We're just going to have a double check on our system.
No, I'm afraid we've just moved on at this point and you need to just wait. No, sorry, we'll just have to hold back. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you for waiting. So we just checked the system. We've consulted Farset Parish Council as the parish it falls within. I appreciate, I think on other applications we did consult Ramsey Town Council. It doesn't look like we did on this occasion, and we have to apologise for that. But not a statutory consultee as such, although obviously it would have been good for us to extend that consultation. Just on a similar vein, we did consult Whittlesea Town Council and Fenland District Council, because that immediately abuts the site.
Yeah, just...
Yeah, thank you. So obviously, you know, I haven't got it open in front of me now, the numbers that we actually consulted in residents. So if it didn't come to the Ramsey Parish, then can we do we take that the residents on the Ramsey side of the of the village didn't get consulted, and it would have only been the Whittlesea side and the Farset side then?
So we did erect a site notice outside the application site, and we consulted 150 residents. So those would have included everyone consulted on the previous applications and objected. Without going into the depths of the system to have a look at the addresses, I can't say for certain whether those addresses are in Ramsey or not. From a quick look, I can see that we've got a letter sent to an address in Herne Road, Ramsey St Mary's, so I'd assume that the letters went out.
Yeah, we'll bring in our Chief Planning Officer.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Corney, for raising your concerns. As the case officer has set out, the consultation has been carried out in accordance with the Development Management Procedure Order, insofar as that we have consulted the impacted parish. To give you comfort, clearly, when you look through the report, there are a number of topic areas that the case officer has looked at. Clearly, that's not limited to any one area. It extends to the broader area, essentially the theme of residential amenity. Obviously, you're discussing tonight matters such as traffic and odour, and those that we will have consulted will have considered the broader area. So to give you assurance, the key themes that would go to the heart of concerns of residents, whether in this application, as expressed here or previously, are still topic areas that are addressed by the case officer in reaching the recommendation before you tonight.
Are there any other questions of clarification? Is it on a different matter?
It was just purely to say I actually take comfort that we've just heard that we had a letter from somebody on Herne Road, so I actually take comfort from that. But I just, I would hate us to be discussing something that the villagers didn't have a chance to comment on because they may not have known. But
Thank you very much, Councillor Corney. Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officers? There are no other questions, so we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion on this particular application? Councillor Wakeford, thank you.
Thank you. Again, we've had helpful clarifications on various points. We've heard a number of concerns recapped and reiterated, and as are picked up in some of the consultation responses as well in the paper, which of course are essentially material to the original determination rather than what's before us this evening. On the points of variation, the increasing height that's not significant and has been discussed, the increasing vehicle movements, which as Highways Authority have explicitly advised, as is picked up in the report, would not be defensible to rest any refusal on an insignificant increase of. I don't see any scope for us to be doing anything other than adopting the officer recommendation of approval. This one, though we hear the understandable concerns from the parish, this one I think again is quite squarely straightforward. So I'm happy to propose up front that we adopt the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Nish.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've looked through it and thought it is an increase which obviously has been looked at, but I don't think there's any particular major issues with that increase. And Highways have been quite comfortable, should we say, in their deliberations with it. And so issues of odour is obviously slightly outside this application anyway, but at least the Environmental Health have looked at the Environmental Agency, etc. So I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nish. Is there anyone else? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I don't think, as my colleague said, there's no reasons to refuse this. I think we've been told that you know, obviously it won't smell from the local residents' point of view. We're basically a westerly wind there. That's the prevailing wind, which should, if anything, there. I mean, obviously, there's smell probably from the actual onion processing, but the only thing I can pick out of it really is, you know, the effect of the screening. 2 metre high bund around the northern edge. Probably that could be done a little better. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but probably tree planting on that would screen the whole site a little better. But I haven't got a problem with it, Chairman. So yeah, I should be for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to contribute before we move on? No. So we will take the proposal from Councillor Wakeford of approval and seconded by Councillor Nish. So all those in approval, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
So therefore that has been approved. As we are halfway through our agenda, we'll just have a quick comfort break for 5 minutes and then we'll come back. which is a planning application in Ramsey, which will be presented to us by our planning officer, Kevin Simpson.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So yes, this is agenda item 3D, which is pages 93 to 120 of the reports pack, relates to the change of use of a vacant bank / indoor market to a hot food takeaway. It's presented at Development Management Committee as the Officer recommendation of approval, differs from that of the Town Council. This application does relate to a Grade 2 listed building, so the committee will also be asked to cast a vote on the associated listed building consent. Just to be clear, that only discusses matters relating to the impact on heritage assets and not to any other factors. So matters like highway safety, residential amenity don't come into the listed building consent application, but they are all considered as a whole in the full application that accompanies it. So there are objections from the Town Council, which are detailed in section 5.1 of the officer report. And these mainly related to highways issues and concerns over lack of parking. So Cambridgeshire County Council Highways have been consulted. They raised no objections to the application. Our consideration is the site is in a sustainable location within the Ramsey Spatial Planning Area. There is ample parking in the vicinity, and also is a consideration that the building itself is already commercial, albeit vacant at present. So it's not like it would result in the introduction of a commercial use where these don't exist already. Obviously, the nature of the town centre is there are a lot of commercial uses there. There is a large free car park within 90 metres of the site and on-street parking on both Great White and the High Street. So I'll just go through and show you some of the slides and then move on to the next sections. So that shows the building there in the centre. It's pink because it's a listed building, and that the other pink buildings are the other listed buildings, and the red hatching shows the extent of the conservation area. So that's an aerial view of the site with the building highlighted in yellow. So you can see it's set forward of the other buildings on that side of Great White, on the junction of Great White and Little White. Next slide, please. So that's the block plan showing the building, as you've seen before on the other application. There are very, very little external changes to the building to accompany the work. So that's the existing elevations. I think the main thing really to take note of is the courtyard elevations, which, as you'll see on the next slide, is where the minimal plant equipment is proposed to go. So that's like cooling and ventilation, etc., with appropriate screening in what's quite a utilitarian area of the building there beneath the stairwell. You'll note there's signage shown on the front elevation, but as detailed in the officer report, that's not for consideration here. That would be a separate advertising consent that would be required for that. Aside from that, very few changes to the external elevations. Next slide, please. So that shows the existing floor plan. It was a bank / indoor market, so it's been a Class E use. Conservation officer has looked at it, and a lot of the features that were historic were removed prior to the use of it being a bank, which I think was in the early 80s from what the conservation officer has said. And the proposed floor plan. So you can see the customer area to the front there, fronting onto the Great White, with a lot of the remaining space given over to matters like storage, cold rooms, office space, etc. And some site photographs. So that's the view west onto Great White, showing it at the junction of Great White and Little White. That's the access to the rear and the stairwell, as you can see, where the plant equipment would go. So very little impact on the historic facade of the building. That's a wider view onto Little White, and then a view of the building from Great White. So the site is located within an area classified as primary shopping frontage of Ramsey, which is considered under local plan policy LP21. So the use as a main town centre use is supported in principle, and that policy aims to retain an active frontage and increase dwell time and footfall in a primary shopping frontage. The hours of opening are given as 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. 7 days a week, which of course would encourage footfall at times when other businesses in the vicinity are open. So you can see there are professional services such as estate agencies, there's solicitors in the area, but there are also other services such as retail uses, there's restaurants, other hot food takeaways, pubs, etc. So it's not unfamiliar in this location, in this area of Ramsey. Conservation have been consulted. They've raised no objections, and this is detailed further in section 7.15 to 7.17 of the report. They consider there'd be no harm to the listed building or the conservation area, and actually consider that the scheme would promote the longer term preservation of the building. So the recommendation from officers is to support with conditions relating to the time limit to implement the plans, to accord with the plans, use materials as stated where there are any changes to the external elevations, hours of operation, and compliance with noise assessment measures and compliance with ventilation system details, both of which have been reviewed by Environmental Health along with the hours of opening, and to which they raised no objections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers on this particular application. The first speaker is Councillor Val Fenley from Ramsey Town Council. Thank you for joining us this evening and welcome. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and you just need to press the middle button.
Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening on behalf of Ramsey Town Council. I am aware that our objections to the change of use to a hot food takeaway must be based on material considerations, and I will come to these. Firstly, I just want to make clear that Ramsey Town Council are keen to develop our town centre and are in fact working with the District Council's economic development team in relation to regeneration of the town. And phase 1 will see 1.5 million of investment from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority for redevelopment works that will build on the heritage, character and independent shopping experience that we feel underpins our small but busy town centre. The primary commercial thoroughfare is Great White, which runs north to south for 500 metres with a combination of residential units, independent shops, cafes and community facilities. Empty units are few. However, as you will have seen from resident feedback to this application, some people are of the opinion that there are too many takeaways, barbers and estate agents. Consultants employed by the District Council as part of the Ramsey Master Plan development, now titled A Vision for Ramsey, also highlighted that there was a limited town centre offer and detailed strengths and weaknesses within the town. They noted limited opportunity to spend and dwell. So I therefore come to material considerations. The National Planning Policy Framework, paragraphs 90 to 95, talk about ensuring the vitality of town centres, ensuring a positive approach to growth, management and adaptation, promoting long-term vitality and viability. So I would suggest that another takeaway, just a few steps from existing takeaways that already sell pizza, will not do that. Definitely not in the same way as other retail options with a differing offer. In fact, the presence of another takeaway, a large chain business, may in fact take away from existing families and their businesses within the town. This is actually listed as a consideration at paragraph 94B. Parking and highway safety is also a material consideration, and with regard to parking directly by 11A Great White, the building sits on a busy junction with double yellow lines around it. The Town Council has concerns about parking, illegal parking, parking enforcement and the impact on nearby streets, particularly Little White. Little White is a narrow junction and this residential street already faces challenges. A chain such as Domino's Pizza is likely to have delivery drivers or motorcycles coming and going regularly, as well as direct customers parking close by. Within the Ramsey Master Plan are projects relating to areas of pedestrianisation, dwell time options, pop-up shops and healthy food options. A Domino's takeaway at the location proposed does not fit with this strategic vision.
Can I just ask, have you got much left?
I'm nearly there.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, the District Council has adopted the Huntingdonshire Futures strategy, where we as stakeholders are working with you. The transition from strategy to action is based upon principles, and I would say that this does not fit with inclusive economy or health embedded. Finally, just to be clear regarding encouragement of big brand names to Ramsey, we have a new commercial area developing at the northern end, close to Tesco's. Lidl have already signed up to go in at this commercial site. It's a much more appropriate location for this type of offer. An edge of town site with excellent parking. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions. So, oh, no, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Obviously, there are matters of debate we'll pick up later, but just on a specific point, compared to the current position of the building in its current use and its empty state, does Ramsey Town Council recognise that the proposal presented to us improves vitality relative to the status quo, but bearing in mind the fact that we're of course not able to consider hypothetical different applications. We're considering the application in front of us.
The building wasn't empty for very long, and there were other people who were interested in taking the building on, so if that answers.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? There are no other questions, so thank you for joining us. Our next speaker for this particular application is the agent, Andrew Hodgson. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for entertaining my presentation. Domino's Pizza is a business that we represent across the UK, and quite a lot of our developments are very much similar to this one in town centre locations, which we find are sustainable. In this case, I'm from Ramsey myself, so I know this site particularly well, and I know that this just offers another choice to the existing takeaways and in the area. So the parking issue isn't really an issue. This is an existing floor space. It's a listed building that we need to get back into use. That's the primary. But it's not as though we're introducing new space into the floor, into the town centre. This is existing conversion. So those trips will already be made if you're going to get fish and chips or some other type. It's just another choice. And with Domino's, high percentage of those traffic movements are for deliveries going out, not people going to collect. So that's if you're going to introduce a use like that, this is probably a good one to do because it's a lot of those are out trips for deliveries. The listed building element is an important one. The longer a listed building gets left, it falls into disrepair and decay. We've had trouble in Ramsey over the years in getting long-term tenants into these buildings. Domino's commitment to this site is very long-term. And more importantly, for the economic benefit of the town, which we really struggle with, is the 25 jobs, part-time and full-time jobs that are going to come with this development. It's really important for Ramsey High Street that a company like Domino's is interested in coming. We've struggled to attract high street brands of this type, and this is actually really crucial. And I just happen to be the agent for the development at the other end of Ramsey as well, where we've got Lidl on board. They would be very keen to see, I can't speak, they're not here, but we want to see other high street brands coming to Ramsey as well, and we don't want to see them being turned away. So in terms of the particular reasons for, in terms of the wider development itself, it's the branding on the site is going to be subtle. The conservation officer is fully on board. We don't believe there is any issue with parking. There's no impact on residential amenity, and there's no actually statutory objections to this planning application. So we are we are very happy with Kevin's approach to the application. It's been thorough. We've worked with them to make sure that all of those reasons are addressed, and quite importantly, there's no objection from County Highways on the principal reason as to why the Town Council are objecting. I think that's mainly I need to.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Obviously, I should say a number of us weren't aware the brand because it doesn't actually matter to us because we're just purely looking at it as a change of use. But as you have mentioned it, and you've mentioned deliveries and pickup, I just can imagine one of the concerns is not necessarily people parking to come and buy because parking is quite close by, and theoretically people will park where they're supposed to and not on the W yellows right outside the front. But how are you going to manage the delivery people that come to pick up the items to take elsewhere, which is probably nothing to do with planning, but I know it will be of concern to those that from Ramsey perspective.
Yep. So obviously during the non-peak times there won't be many delivery drivers working, but during the peak times it'll be managed by the fact that there'll only be probably 2/3 delivery drivers at the address at any one time or parking in the area because most will be out delivering, so it'll be staggered in that way in terms of they're staggered in terms of when the deliveries go out. So that'll be the main reason, is that they won't all be there at the same time.
Thank you. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to elaborate on that, actually, so about the delivery of the goods to the building in the first place. As a what consideration can you say that you put into to timing? So obviously, I can only imagine that that'll be a reasonable size vehicle to deliver goods in.
I'd imagine. Yeah, in terms of deliveries of produce, yeah, that's probably going to be on a weekly basis, and it won't be HGVs or anything like that because it's not that scale of business. So it's more delivery vans of that type.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? No other questions, so thank you very much for joining us. We will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officers. Are there any questions? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Is it worth asking officers for a steer on the status in planning terms of both the Ramsey master plan, subsequently relabelled vision documents, and the district council's place strategy containing visions for the longer-term future of Huntingdonshire, as both were referenced on behalf of the Town Council?
Thank you, Councillor Wakeford, and through you, Chair. Clearly, we do want to see the market town strategies and the regeneration strategies of the Council deliver and bring economic investment to our town centres. As we move that forward, it's how that works with our new local plan and how we ensure our policies of the future, of course, work in synergy with the regeneration ambitions, both as part of the town strategy itself, but of course as part of the place strategy. However, tonight what we were bound by is the development plan in terms of how we make our decisions, and of course our development plan comprises obviously the Huntingdonshire Local Plan to 2036, any relevant neighbourhood plans, and of course, just for completeness, minerals and waste plans, but they're not relevant to the scheme before us tonight. So with that in mind, I would urge caution. There's limited weight that can be attached to those strategies now because they do not form part of the development plan. Clearly, as picked up tonight as well, we're not here to look at who the end user is. As per the planning application, it's about land use and land use only. And while, of course, in the fullness of time, we will capture the ambitions of the regeneration ambitions, a refusal based on that ambition here tonight, I'm afraid is, in my professional view, would be an unsustainable reason for refusal or a defensible position should a refusal be determined tonight and subsequently appealed.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. It's a similar vein to Councillor Wakeford, but just picking up the point in terms of competition from similar businesses elsewhere on the high street, could you give us a steer on how we should approach that topic, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so that's not a material planning consideration, so that's not something we can take into account. As Clara pointed out, this is about land use, not who the end user will be. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officers? There are no more questions, so we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Thank you, Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't at the town council meeting, so I can't sort of comment on the reason why. But I know that they're in very good faith. That having spoken to them since, I think it's the issue would have been the conflict or potential conflict between the master plans, and I think actually from Councillor Wakeford and Clara's response, I think hopefully that can sort of settle. So that side of the argument, that it takes away that conflict. Hopefully, I think I won't go as far as to propose it in even direction. I'm going to wait to see how the debate goes. But it's certainly the high street, a name on the high street would be welcome. I think ideally we'd all like to see it in the perfect location, but that's, as we say, the application's in front of us. We don't have that luxury. So I'll stop there at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I thought Mark got a few others in before me. Having looked at this and looking at it in pure terms of the fact that it's a change of use and it's utilising something which is currently not in use, I can see no reason why not. I do have concerns, like I'm sure a lot of people do, as to what may happen in future on parking, etc., etc. But of course, that's outside our remit in its entirety, because Highways have looked at it and we know that there's double yellow lines out the front of it and there's parking nearby. But that aside, I can see no reasons why we shouldn't utilise this. Listening to Councillor Wakeford, I understand his concerns as to whether it links in directly, but of course it's what we've got in front of us now, which actually doesn't necessarily link to maybe some future aspirations. But from what we've got from a planning application perspective, I'm happy to propose that we accept the officer's recommendations of approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Niche. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. For me, the reasons for approval are summarised very well on pages 98 and 99. LP 21 applies here, as we can see. And I think the sort of middle of that page 99, where it says the policy is not explicit on the provision of hot food takeaways within a primary shopping frontage. The aim of the policy remains that a proposal should increase footfall and support the vitality of the town centre. That seems to me to be achieving this here. I visited the site today, actually, and a number of sort of similar outlets. Other outlets are available, I should probably say, but I think it will increase the vitality of the town centre in Ramsey, and as we've heard from Councillor Niche, there is car parking nearby, so I support the application. Thank you.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. I think all the points I was planning to make have been covered very elegantly by Councillors Niche and Sanderson. So yeah, I think this is a good use of the unit. I think, I'm familiar with similar patterns in my local ward, but we've, got some big units that we're keen to see used, and we can't necessarily pick and choose exactly who the new tenant's going to be, but this seems like an entirely appropriate use for the building. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it'd be nice to see, it's a lovely old building, although I never used to think so when I banked there in the 70s, because you always dreaded going in there. But it's a lovely old building, and it'd be nice to see it in use again. Ramsey is one of the areas that seems a little bit forgotten, so I think this can only improve, probably the daytime and nighttime economy, really. There is parking, which is not many paces away, actually. Over the road is the Mews, which is probably, 50 yards away. So there is parking there if anyone wishes to park and walk and pick their sub prop or whatever. So yeah, I thoroughly approve it. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. References that occasionally Ramsey might be or feel forgotten. Of course, we don't forget about it, and I think my colleagues have completely the right analysis of this application. There's no defensible basis for us to turn it down, albeit we might well wish there might be a different alternative application we could envisage that might be even better. But I did just want to thank the Town Council, not just for engagement tonight, but the wider interest in the objectives around supporting the vitality of the High Street and Ramsey, as was referenced, and clearly the work with the District Council is ongoing on that. It is not 1.5 million that we've got out of the Combined Authority, though. It's nearly 1.7 million, and we've counted every penny of that to try and maximise what we can do to support Ramsey. But I think in terms of the application before us this evening, it is straightforward, but thanks to the Town Council for its ongoing support with that work.
Councillor Wakeford, would you be happy to second that proposal?
Yes, if you haven't had a second already, very happy to
Thank
second.
you. Okay, are there any other councillors that wish to contribute to the discussion? No, in that case, we will move on. We've had a proposal from Councillor Niche of approval, which has been seconded by Councillor Wakeford. All those in favour?
Sorry, this is the proposal on page 104, so there'll be a separate vote on
to
page 111. Yes.
So we've got to do one for
we've got-
listed.
You would need to have separate vote, yes, those two votes. Yeah.
Okay. So the first one's for
On page 104.
listed. So our first recommendation of approval is on page 104, which is subject to conditions, including the following: time limits, development in accordance with approval plans, materials, hours of operation, compliance with noise, compliance with ventilation system documents, which is the listed building consent. All those that are would like to approve, can you please raise your hand?
No,
That's
the
the- oh, the-
listed one is on page 111.
Oh, right, so on the housing.
Yeah.
The housing approval. All those in favour? So change of use, so, oh yeah,
Change of use and a list of building.
right. Okay, so this first vote is for the change of use. So all those in favour of change of use?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's approved.
And the second vote,
So could we have the same proposers and seconders?
yeah, are you happy
thank
with
you.
that? That's fine. And the second vote is for
Page 111.
is listed building consent to make the alterations to the listed building. All those in favour of approval, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So that is approved. We will move on to item 3E on the agenda. Oh, yeah. I'd written that down, sorry. Welcome back, Councillor Clark. We will move on to item 3E on the agenda, which is a variation of Code condition 2 on an application in Abbottsley. And this will be presented to us by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. So the site in front of you tonight is land southwest of Caldecott Manor Farm, St Neots Road, Abbottsley. And the proposal is the variation of conditions 2, which relates to extension to duration of the planning consent, and condition 5, which relates to biodiversity management and planting. So you can see the outline of the site in red in front of you. So the site comprises 2 arable fields to the north of St Neots Road, which links the village of Abbottsley to St Neots. The surrounding area is rural and agricultural in character and appearance, and there's a few residential properties in the immediate vicinity of the site, the nearest being the cottages at Lansbury Farm to the west of the site. The nearest settlements are the village of Abbottsley, about 0.5 kilometres to the east of the site, and St Neots, approximately 2.3 kilometres to the east. There is a bridle way that separates the 2 fields that make up the site, which run from St Neots Road northwards to Cambridge Road. So you can, again, this is just the constraints map. So you can see just around in the middle, you can see a blue line. That's the bridle way running through the middle of the site between the 2 fields. So plan permission was granted under reference 14/01623/FUL for a solar farm comprising arrays of panels, plant equipment, housing, security measures, landscaping, fencing, and underground cable. As mentioned, this section 73 application seeks to vary conditions 2 and 5 attached to that plan permission, and also the approved plan list. So a covering letter was submitted with the application, which outlines the following. Plan permission for the solar farm was granted in 2015, and a first phase of development, subsequently constructed, has been operational since February 2016. On that aerial image, you can see the first phase of the solar farms in the right-hand fields, which is phase 1 we'll refer to. So the applicant now intends to build out a second phase of development on the consented project. So that would comprise a further solar PV array in the eastern field within the consented project area, and also in the eastern part of the field to the west of the operational portion of the site. The westernmost section within the approved planning boundary will remain undeveloped. So this is actually a reduction in the overall area what was originally approved. So Abbottsley Parish Council have objected, and this is why the application is in front of you tonight. The Parish Council does not agree with the extension of time being extended as set out within condition 2. The Parish Council has concerns regarding existing conditions not being implemented. So as stated, so phase 1 started to export electricity on the 24th February 2016. Therefore, the current permission expires on the 24th of February 2046, given the 30-year duration of the consent. To avoid the situation of open-ended permission and noting the advancement of technology, officers feel that an extension of the approved duration from 30 years to 40 years from the date when electrical power was first exported from any of the solar panels to the electricity grid is reasonable and acceptable, given that the solar farm started to export in 24th February 2016. This would mean the consent would expire on the 24th February 2056. The variation to the condition regarding the biodiversity management plan is acceptable. I'll just show you so that's a photo of the western access, so the field to the left that you saw, the western fields. That is the public byway running through the centre of the site, running through the centre between the 2 fields. That's the eastern access. So you can see phase 1 just in the background there. That's a photo just showing you phase 1. That's the substation that goes alongside it. And this is the proposed plan. The reason why this wasn't in your plans pack is that it showed badger sets, so I just had to get those amended to remove those. But you can see there, if you look over towards the left-hand side, just move the cursor. So this area, that is in the original approval to have panels on, but under this section 73, it's reduced, so that will remain undeveloped. But you can see there, kind of phase 1 over here, the rest of the build out in that field, and then a reduced element in the western fields. Sorry, I'm showing you the wrong plan now, which is really helpful, isn't it? So sorry, that was the approved scheme as per the 2014. And this is the proposed site plan in front of you, so you can see phase 1 is here. Obviously then the blue shading is the proposed panels. You can see a reduction in the western fields. So the officer recommendation is one of approval, and the main points to note is the increase in condition 2 from 30 to 40 years. Obviously most of the other conditions as per the original consent, which some of the wording will need to be amended, given now that's a phased development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have one speaker, and that particular speaker is the applicant, Ben Ryder. And I believe you are on Zoom.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Just wait a minute, we're just changing the volume so we can hear you. Yep, thank you for joining us, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you. And I'm the applicant on behalf of GCP Info, which is a FTSE 250 investment vehicle and fund based out of London. So planning permission for the solar project at Caldecott Farm was granted in 2015, and the first phase of the development was subsequently constructed, which has been operational since February 2016. This discussion relates to the amended details, as Lewis has outlined. The proposed phase 2 development layout within the 2 fields either side of the existing operational solar farm is well within the original approved footprint and constitutes a reduced overall footprint compared to the already consented layout within those 2 fields. As such, the impacts of the project, in particular visual and landscape, will be less than identified in the original application. The phase 2 development should be seen in the context of national policy and the government's national missions, in particular to reach zero carbon electricity by 2030, and this project will directly contribute to that mission. Relating to the objection to the extension of duration, we refer to the Huntingdonshire Local Plan, Policy LP 35 on renewable and low carbon energy, whereby a proposal for an extension of time can be permitted, provided that measures to address adverse planning impacts remain effective and adhere to prevailing standards. We have worked diligently to ensure that key elements of visual, landscape, and biodiversity principally include vegetation planting and management measures, and the effectiveness of these measures will improve over time as planting matures, rather than simply remaining effective. Relating to the second objection around concerns that the existing conditions have not been observed, we have carefully considered all elements of the planning consent and fully intend to honour all existing ongoing requirements of planning conditions, as well as the proposed amended conditions, with particular reference to condition 5 and carrying out development in accordance with the landscape and biodiversity management plan. As part of this submission, we've included an updated ecological survey, an updated landscaping plan, and an update to the original submitted landscape and visual impact assessment. Following the recommendations of the updated ecological survey, additional species surveys were undertaken, including for reptiles and badgers, and these have been incorporated and accommodated for in a revised biodiversity management plan that's been also provided. The current owner, Gravis, acquired the project post-construction, and the proponent of this submission has engaged and cooperated with the LPA during the Section 73 process. from instigation of pre-application advice to understanding the concerns of the council through regular communication over a period of 18 to 20 months. The documentation submitted as part of this submission reflects feedback from the planning officer, and we seek its approval to enable the phase 2 development to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
We will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Are there any questions of planning, of clarification? There are no questions. Therefore, we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Corney, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of bizarrely, I'm probably more upset that we're not actually filling this and filling out the original application. So I think it's a I personally see it as a good thing. So it's a great shame that it's not the original application is not being followed through. The time the time limit on it. Solar panels now their life expectancy now is a lot better than it was originally. So I think it makes sense to sort of utilise them for as long as possible. So I'm quite happy to propose this. Should we want to move the meeting forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corney. Does anybody else wish to? Councillor Wakeford.
Sorry, only as I didn't see other hands, though Councillor Sanderson has now indicated. So forgive me if I'm stealing his thunder. But I completely agree with Councillor Corney. It does feel slightly odd to be agreeing to a reduction of solar panel space, but of course we don't have power or authority to require applicants to build out applications. That's a whole separate debate relevant in areas of planning and development beyond solar panels. So I can't see any issue with the application in front of us. It is supported by LP 35 as referenced around the extension. So very pleased to second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Wakeford said, LP 35 applies here. And if you look at paragraph 7.17, it says it's normal for solar farm permissions to span 40 years, which reflect the operational lifespan. So I think it's a pretty clear report, and I'm happy to second or propose approval.
That's fine. Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to contribute? We will move on to the proposal. So we've got a proposal from Councillor Corney, which has been seconded by Councillor Wakeford for approval. So all those in favour of approval, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Therefore, that has been approved. We will move on to item 3F on the agenda. Item 3F on the agenda is an application in Huntingdon, and that will be presented to us by our planning officer, Lucy Bateman.
Thank you. These applications are referred to Development Management Committee as the officer's recommendation of refusal is contrary to Huntingdon Town Council's recommendation of approval. The applications are presented together, so we've got a full application relating to the change of use and a listed building consent for the alterations to the building. So members will be required to make two separate decisions. So number 111 High Street is a Grade 2 listed building and is located within Huntingdon Conservation Area. The property is also in close proximity to a number of other listed buildings, as you can see on the screen, and it also falls within the primary shopping area of Huntingdon. The application seek planning permission and listed building consent for the subdivision of the existing ground floor, existing retail unit but not occupied at present, into 2 smaller units to the front and a car showroom to the rear, with 31 short stay hotel rooms at first floor level, alongside the various internal and external alterations. So in terms of local plan policies, the smaller retail units to the front and the hotel rooms are supported in principle by our policies in our local plan. However, the proposed use as a car showroom is not considered to be a main town centre use, as per the glossary in the local plan and the MPPF. And policy LP21, as you can see, an extract on the screen clearly sets out that non-main town centre uses will not be supported at ground floor level within a primary shopping frontage. And we've also got up there policy TC1, which is a Huntingdon neighbourhood plan policy, which only supports retail uses at ground floor level in a primary shopping area. So the full application is therefore recommended for refusal on these grounds. Both the full and listed building consent applications are recommended for refusal due to inaccuracies on the submitted drawings, the absence of floor plans for the attic and second floor, and the lack of additional information regarding the extent and nature of works which would likely be required, considering the existing building is in a poor state of repair. Officers consider that there are potentially a lot of works that would be required to bring it into the proposed use, and those haven't been set out within the submission. Without this additional information, it's not been possible for the Conservation Officer to gauge the impact of the proposals on the significance of the listed building. So whilst it's acknowledged the proposal could secure a long-term viable use for the building, we've not been provided with sufficient details to add weight to this against potential harm in that planning balance. So I'll just run through the plans and highlight some of those discrepancies that have been picked up. So we've got the front elevation here, and you'll see from the site photo later on, there is a projecting element in the central part of the building with the pitched roof, and you'll see there's 6 windows on that 3rd floor. But on the floor plans, we've got 5 windows, and there's no indication of that projecting element. And that's just a couple of the points that have been picked up by the Conservation Officer. So the existing elevations, and then just a comparison with the proposed, so a 1st floor extension to the flat roof element of the building, insertion of roof lights. And then lastly, 2 refusal reasons on the full application for the change of use. The application hasn't been accompanied by a noise impact assessment, so the Council's Environmental Protection team have raised concerns regarding potential sound levels with the hotel bedrooms, given the town centre location and the number of plant items surrounding the site. So without a noise impact assessment, cannot be satisfied that the internal sound levels within the proposed hotel rooms would be acceptable, and there's been no mitigation measures put forward if they were required. And the site also falls within an air quality management area, and as set out in LP36, an air quality assessment is required to assess the application. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we've just got some site photos to run through quickly. The front elevation from Market Square. And then this is the relationship with the Market Square, with the church. And then this is the side elevation of the building, just between those 2 buildings, and then the rear elevation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker for this particular application, which is Councillor David Cole from Huntingdon Town Council. Welcome, and thank you for being very patient with us. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you very much. I'm David Landon Cole from Huntingdon Town Council, speaking in favour of both applications. The report you have before you recommends refusal because the proposed change of uses benefits would not outweigh the potential harms, and the potential harms come because the application is problematic. We argue that the benefits have been understated, that the building is so important to Huntingdon that the benefits of bringing it back into use do outweigh any potential harms, and that problems with the application should be dealt with by way of conditions, and the importance of the building means more leeway is warranted than usual. On the benefits, being brought back into use in any form is a substantial benefit, not least because it would safeguard the building itself. TC1 and BE3 from the neighbourhood plan support this, as do parts of the local plan, as in the report. And we do believe the report underplays the importance of that point. The shop units are a benefit, as supported by TC1. The hotel is a benefit. Those points aren't contested, other than the scale of their benefits, but I'm happy to take questions. We argue that the car showroom is also a benefit and is not on a primary shop front. I believe that 7.13 and 7.14 of the report, I'm afraid, are flawed and should be set aside. I'd welcome questions on that, as I can't make the argument in 3 minutes. On the harms, the benefits, as we know, have to be weighed up against any potential harms. The only harms are potential ones because of the problems with the drawings. We agree with 7.33 that some matters can be dealt with by way of conditions. We have a range of suggestions thereupon. But we disagree respectfully with 7.33 in saying that the drawing errors are so bad as to fatally undermine the proposal, given the scale of the benefits. We contend that they are sufficient to give an overview of the proposed development. For instance, as was pointed out by Ms. Pateman, 2 small windows are merged into one large window, a mistake, not a fatal one. Specific objection at 7.29 is the section of masonry projects forward, and that is not shown on the drawings. That's true, although we don't think the matter of a few centimetres, again, is irredeemable. The attic's not in the drawing, we concede, but it could be that the proposal is simply not to do anything with the attic. Pardon me. We submit that a possible solution to this is a condition requiring that the conservation officer have access to the building and see and approve an updated set of plans. That would allow the owner to get going, while also giving HDC the opportunity to come back to this when an application is made to discharge that condition. So to conclude, we think the building is so important, the potential benefits so high, and the risk of it worsening so great that permission should be given, even if it has to be, if I could just have 15 seconds to be conditioned, we would suggest a condition for a short start time, if possible. If you can't grant permission, please don't let this turn into the old Falcon in St Neots. Take enforcement action or take out a compulsory purchase order. Thank you.
Thank you very much for addressing us this evening. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Wakefield.
Thank you, Councillor Landon Cole, and I'll ask this slowly enough so you have a chance to finish your glass of water. I don't normally like to rise to an invitation to ask if there's anything more you wanted to say. However, I do feel compelled. You made reference to 2 specific paragraph references that you suggested were incorrect, that I didn't capture or didn't register. And I wonder if you might briefly just draw our attention to those 2 and how significant your suggestion of falsehood in them is.
Thank you. I shall try to break the habit of a lifetime and be brief. I don't think it's a question of falsehood so much as disagreeing on interpretation. 7.13 is looking at the NPPF. The NPPF doesn't say that main town centre uses can only take place in the town centre. It says that main town centre uses should preferably take place in the town centre. You can do other things. That's then relied on by 7.14, which looks at the NPPF, TC1 from the neighbourhood plan and LP21 from the local plan. On LP21, this isn't a primary shopping frontage for the car showroom by virtue of the fact it's round the back. The primary shopping frontage is the 2 shops. I'd add that LP21 says a proposal for any other town centre use at ground floor level may be supported where it will make a positive contribution to vitality and viability, etc., etc., etc. We submit that if the car showroom enables the rest of the development and isn't on a shopping frontage, it enhances the area, and so LP21 actually supports the development. TC1 just doesn't come into play because that's talking about retail provision, but to the extent that it does come into play, it's because of the enabling role of the showroom, it's supportive. I would say that Section 7 of the MPPF is either silent or weakly supportive of the position, because Clause 90 of the MPPF says that planning should take, quote, a positive approach to town centres' growth management and adaptation, end quote. We submit that this is part of that adaptation. I will say a luxury car showroom isn't what Huntingdon Town Council would have chosen for here, but for the back of the building, but it does mean the building comes back into use, and that is really, really important to the Town Council, to the town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. We will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. So are there any questions of clarification that councillors wish to ask? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I suspect we'd be here all night if we asked officers to give us a very detailed analysis of every single planning point Councillor Landacole just raised, but I wonder if on the basic point around the appropriate consideration of the car showroom as being a town centre location and on a shop frontage location, or indeed anything else critical that he's just referenced, officers might wish to comment upon or clarify for benefit of the panel's reflections.
Thank you, and completely appreciate the points made. In terms of the assessment, the primary shopping frontages are essentially mapped out as part of the local plan and the policies, and that's what LP21 draws on. So what we're looking at, the building at present is a primary shopping frontage. I note the point that the car showroom will be to the rear, but we're assessing the building as a whole. And the building is currently on a primary shopping frontage. So I think hopefully that covers that point of the assessment. Sorry, I'm not sure if there was anything else I was supposed to clarify.
No, that's helpful. And otherwise, whether there were any other comments officers wish to make in relation to any of the more specific points Councillor Landacole raised, but bearing in mind we've obviously got benefit of the detailed report, and it is whatever time it is this evening already.
Yeah, and I think I will just add, and it's in the report and did acknowledge at the start, we appreciate this would bring the building back into use, and obviously that's something that our policies will support, and there is a planning balance to be made. At the moment, we haven't got the level of information required to properly assess this application and carry out that planning balance as to whether, just because there is conflict with some parts of the development plan, if we had all those other details, not preempting any future decision, but we haven't been provided with the level of information required to carry out that full assessment and make that judgment.
I bring in our Chief Planning Officer.
If I just may amplify some of the points that Lucy's made, not forgetting the fact that this is a listed building, so we do have obligations as the local planning authority in how we consider listed buildings. As Lucy has made the point, if the economic case in itself was substantial enough, that would be a material consideration in its own right. As the report addresses, the material factors have all been considered and do not outweigh the harm identified. Furthermore, I would pick up the fact that you were perhaps as a panel encouraged to consider giving more leeway because it's not in use and perhaps in the state it's in. Dare I say, I would strongly discourage you from giving that any weight. Otherwise, I'm afraid, that's almost like the message we don't want to be sending out. Leave your buildings fall into decline and then we give you leeway. So with that in mind, I'd ask you to disregard that point that's made. The salient planning points are set out in the report before you. And as mentioned, this is a listed building, so again, we have obligations as the local planning authority to, we have a duty, a statutory duty to preserve and enhance our heritage assets. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Am I correct in saying that the Conservation Office has requested a site meeting with the applicants and that hasn't been forthcoming yet, which, among other reasons, goes to the fact there's a lack of detail on this application?
Yeah, that is correct. They've not been able to access the building. And just another point to pick up on, the applicant, the agent has been invited to make amendments to address our concerns during the course of the application. That wasn't forthcoming, and that we are where we are now.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. Just because I'm relatively new to this committee, can you just give us, or officers, give us some advice in terms of the suggestion by Councillor Landon Cole regarding the possibility of putting conditions on this application rather than recommending for refusal? What that scenario may look like if the committee was minded to follow that path?
So it is addressed in the report at 7.23. There are some matters and minor discrepancies that perhaps could be addressed by a suitably worded condition, but I think there are some fundamental flaws and errors and lack of information that we couldn't condition because we require that to carry out the assessment on what the harm is to this heritage asset.
Are there any other points of clarification? Councillor Wakeford.
I suppose just to double check that there's no applicant or agent for them that we've forgotten to invite in on the Zoom call, that they I have correctly understood that they are not here. Because otherwise I dare say we might have questions for them arising out of some of the points colleagues have just raised, but we can't ask them if they're not here.
There's nobody on the list and there appears to be nobody on Zoom. Are there any other questions, clarification? In that case, we will move on. Councillor Butler. Into the debate. Oh, lovely. So we will move into the debate and Councillor Butler will start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a very poor application, isn't it? And I can't work out. Normally you can see what the applicant's trying to achieve, but you can't work this out on just what they're trying to achieve. Two shops at the front with no washing, toilet facilities, car showroom at the back, really not in the right place. Most of these are going out of town now where you can drive up and inspect cars with a lot more room. I can understand the hotel part. Why not turn it into a whole hotel? But that's not what we're here for. It's just a very poor application, and obviously there's a lot of questions that have not been answered. And first off, I just agree with the officers and refusal, and send it back and come back with something a little bit different. I think that's more in keeping. Thank you. That's a proposal to refuse.
Thank you very much, Councillor Butler. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Butler here. It's you look through it and think, as much as I can understand where the town council are coming from, and actually from us as the district council as well, we really want these buildings to be brought back into use, but brought back into use properly, or at least an understanding of how they may be brought back into use, as opposed to sort of this wishy-washy application where the applicant can't even be bothered, by the sounds of it, to meet up with us and or attend this evening. So I completely agree on the refusal. I think on the balance of it, it's very difficult to make any balance of it because there's no clarity of what they're actually after. So I think because the officer has clearly gone through the reasons for refusal. I think some of us could think of even some more, but they're probably not material planning reasons. But But anyway, so I was happy to second the officer's recommendation of refusal, along with Councillor Butler, who's proposed it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sanderson.
Yeah, I think we're all familiar with this site, aren't we? It's pretty prominent in the high street. And Councillor Cole spoke very eloquently. I can understand it hasn't been in use for many years, this building. But as Councillor Butler said, it's a very poor application. No noise impact assessment. That's a really basic requirement here, isn't it? Won't allow our officer team to meet on site so they can progress some of these issues. And I agree, I think the car showroom's totally inappropriate for a town centre location. But I think there's another comment here, isn't there, at 7.34, not possible to assess the potential impact of the development upon the heritage asset because there's an absence of sufficient and correct information. On those bases, I think we should decline the application. Thank you.
Councillor McAdam.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the site of the old Woolworths, which is what it is crying out for redevelopment and bringing back into use. I mean, you stand there, you look at it, and you only got to look up and you can see that the top windows on it seem to be rotting away. It's actually deteriorating before our eyes. So I'm very disappointed that we haven't got a good application here to bring that into use this evening. My heart is with the desires of the town council, but we've got to be realistic here, and this application does not fulfil the requirements that we can go with it. So I will have to refuse the application along with my colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I'm likely to vote in line with others that have spoken already, but I think it's really important to be clear that we do want to see this building come forwards. We're not against the prospect of finding new uses for these really key buildings in our town. I mean, just looking at the site plan, they've got some luxury cars that I'm not sure how they're going to get in and out of the site. There's some pillars they've got to navigate, let alone actually an entry egress point. So there's lots of unanswered questions, and hopefully there are some good answers to those questions, and we'll see this application come back or something different for this building in the near future. But yes, I'm inclined to agree with my colleagues. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think we're all on the same page here this evening, so not to draw it out, but I did wish to just acknowledge the passion with which Councillor Landon Cole spoke, which I'm sure we can all empathise, particularly those of us who are town councillors locally, but frankly all of us. As was said, this is a prominent location in our high street in Huntingdon and in the district. I'd also commend the detail and care with which he had obviously put into preparing those comments. I did consider a point of order earlier because Councillor Niche omitted his customary calling out of Abbottsley Parish Council on the item previously for not bothering to turn up, and clearly Huntingdon Town Council has turned up and then some. However, I do concur with colleagues that despite the ambition and effort there, while this site is calling out for redevelopment, it's not this application. As Councillor McAdam said, we simply can't approve something that doesn't meet our rules. So I'm content, albeit with a very heavy heart, to support the proposal before us, and would reiterate the plea others have made as well to whoever concerned to bring forward a proposal for this application that we could adopt.
Thank you. So we have to do two votes, one for the full application, which is on page 154 to 5, and for listed building consent. So Councillor Butler and Councillor Niche, are you happy to propose and to second refusal for both of those? Okay. So we'll take the first one, which is the full application. All those that wish to refuse, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
So that has been refused. We'll move on to the second vote, which is the listed building consent, to which we have a proposal of refusal. All those who wish to refuse.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Therefore, that has been refused. We will move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is the appeal decisions, and we will have a report given to us by our planning service manager.
Thank you, Chair. 3 appeal decisions this month. The first one was an application in St Neots. The application was allowed on appeal. The question here was around policy, interpretation policy LP9. The inspector disagreed with our view that this was exiled outside the built-up area and consequently approved the application. Second application was another site in St Neots and associated with a fence. Again, the inspector took a different view that the fence did not harm the setting of the area and therefore granted the planning permission. The third appeal decision was refused and the appeal dismissed. No costs were on any of these applications.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our meeting. I'd just like to say thank you to our planning officers for the reports that you have made for us and for presenting to us this evening. And thank you to those who contributed to our discussions this evening. So with that, I'll end the meeting.